Hey guys, my name is Mr. Taylor. I am so glad you could join us today. Today we're going to do a short, quick video all about exponents. So let's get started. You basically know what an exponent looks like. You have two parts to it. You have the base, in this case our letter B is called the base, and you have the exponent. In this case our letter X is the exponent. What that means is the exponent tells you how many times to multiply the base together. So if we saw a raised to the fourth power, that just means I take a and multiply it together 4 times. A times a times a times a. It works with numbers the same. 3 to the 5th power just means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times another 3. That's all exponents mean. So let's look at a couple of basic rules that show up when we deal with exponents. First one you need to remember, anything to the 0 power, it doesn't matter what it is, it equals 1. So x to the 0 power is just 1. Negative exponents. When you have a negative exponent, I want you to think reciprocal. In other words, flip it. If you have x to the negative 2nd power, that really means 1 over x to the positive 2nd power. Instead of keeping it in the numerator, we moved it down to the denominator and changed the sign on the exponent. Sometimes you'll even see a fractional exponent, x to the 2/3. In this case, you're going to keep the x to the 2nd power. However, since it has a fraction, whatever the denominator is, in this case it is a 3, you're going to take the root. So since it's a 3, we take the 3rd root of that x squared. And of course, don't ever forget, guys, normally when you just see a letter all by itself, we don't ever write an exponent. But you need to understand it is an x to the 1st power, or a 2 to the 1st power, or whatever the base is. So let's look at the properties of exponents. These are some rules that we just need to make sure we understand. So if we are trying to multiply exponential terms that have the same base, the rule says that you add the exponents, but you keep the base the same. So if I had an x to the 3rd times an x to the 2nd, so you see we're multiplying. They both have the same base letter x. My rule says I'm just going to add their exponents, but I'm going to keep the base the same. So if I add 3 plus 2, we get an x to the 5th. It works with numbers just the same. 5 squared times 5 to the 4th. Hey, the bases are the same. Keep your base a base of 5. And now add your exponents. 2 plus 4 equals 6. But remember, if the bases aren't the same, don't do anything to the problem. A to the 3rd times b to the 2nd. Hey, my bases aren't the same. I can't add their exponents. I'm going to leave it as a to the 3rd times b to the 2nd. Okay, another property we want to be familiar with says when you are dividing exponential terms, again with the same base, instead of adding, you're going to subtract the exponents and keep the base the same. So if I had an x to the 5th divided by an x to the 2nd, remember that's all a fraction line means is we're dividing, I'm going to keep the base the same. Both of them have a base of x, but I'm going to subtract their exponents. 5 minus 2 gives me an x to the 3rd. It evens worked with numbers still. 4 to the 3rd divided by 4 to the 6th, my bases are the same, so I subtract. I keep the base of 4, and 3 minus 6 is a negative 3. So my answer is 4 to the negative 3rd power. But don't forget, we learned in our rules of exponents a little while ago, negative exponent means reciprocal. So I would want to rewrite this answer to be 1 over 4 to the 3rd. And the last property we want to go over. When your exponential term has exponents itself, the rule says that you want to multiply the exponents, but you'll keep the base the same. So we have an x to the 2nd power in parentheses here, And then that whole thing is raised to the third power. So you can see my exponential term x squared has its own exponent of 3. So the rule says keep the base the same, x, and I'm just going to multiply these two exponents together. 2 times 3 is 6, so I get an x to the 6th power. Okay, this one's a little trickier. Inside parentheses, I have a 2x to the 3rd, and that whole thing is getting raised to the 4th power. I want to multiply the exponents. I have to do them separately though. So I'll start with 2. Now remember, 2 is already raised to the 1st power. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 4 and get 2 to the 4th power. My x is to the 3rd. I multiply it by the power of 4. 3 times 4 is 12. So I should have simplified this to be 2x to the 4th, or 2 to the 4th, x to the 12th. Okay? Don't forget, sometimes you will have to put those things together. So the last thing I want to remind you guys of is maybe a little trick to help you remember all these different properties. Now, a lot of you are real good at remembering PEMDAS, or your order of operations. You know that the P stands for parentheses, the E is your exponents, then we multiply and we divide, and then we add and subtract. The thing I want you to do when you write this order of operations, when you write PEMDAS, please write it vertically, write it going up and down, and I'm going to show you why with our little trick. So if you remember the first property we talked about, it says when you're multiplying exponential terms, add the exponents. Well, if you look back at PEMDAS, you find the multiplying. What is the letter directly below multiplying? It's an A. So that just reminds you, oh my gosh, the multiplication means you add. So your properties of exponents, if you can write them vertically like this, the trick will always be you move down one level to know what to do. If you're multiplying the exponents that have the same base, you add the exponents. Our second property said, hey, remember what happens when you're dividing exponents? Oh, that's right, you subtract their exponents, okay? So when you divide exponential terms that have the same base, divide, the number directly under the D is an S. Oh, and that stood for subtract. Okay, there's no way it's going to work for everything. Well, let's try our third property. Look at this, it does work. When you have exponential terms and those exponential terms have their own exponents, so I looked at the letter E, the letter below the E is M. Oh my gosh, that means I multiply the exponents, but I keep the base the same. So I really, really like this little memory trick, okay? Sometimes these properties can be hard to remember and they get very confusing. So if you know your order of operations, which y'all already know very, very well, just write it out vertically and find, okay, I'm multiplying. What's the letter below multiplying? Okay, I add their exponents. Ooh, my exponent has an exponent. Ooh, the letter underneath that is an M. I'm going to multiply their exponents. Okay? Hopefully that's a nice little trick to help you guys out. I appreciate you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you for our next lesson. We'll see you.